Heather, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, Doug. Good to be here.
And congratulations on your new and upcoming book here. Nick and I, through our show today, have said that this is one book we need to read.
I heard Nick's comment before the break, yeah.
The Men's Guide to Corporate Culture. And at the most bizarre time in the history, perhaps, of business, where so many people are working from home. Let's talk about that topic first. In my experience, I'm 57 years old. When folks did work from home over the years, maybe part-time, it was almost frowned upon at times. Like, oh, how, you're working from home? You're not really working. How did you manage to work that out with the boss? That sort of thing. I don't think I'm that far off when I say it was frowned upon by many companies for many years for people who worked even part-time from home.
Oh, absolutely. And now over half of Americans during the pandemic actually work from home. If you're fortunate enough to have kept your job and be able to work from home, it's not easy. I mean, if you have kids and you have your dog running around in the background, Jeffrey Toobin at CNN, he learned the hard way that the Zoom camera is always on. So I think technology has really saved us. It's saved jobs throughout the pandemic, but it also presents a challenge as we go back to the workforce. It's kind of weird because we've been by ourselves for 8 months or 10 months once we go back to the office, and we're used to maybe dressing in our pajamas, and now we actually have to relate to each other again in person. So it's going to be a big shift from teleworking.
Yeah, and taking a shower before, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, for instance, that sort of thing.
Yes, do that.
The full name of your book, The Men's Guide to Corporate Culture, a practical guide to the new normal and relating to female coworkers in the modern workplace. It is sort of fun, frankly, when you see more, and it's going to happen again now that there's been an increase in the pandemic and coronavirus. When you see newscasters broadcasting from home. There was a weather broadcaster the other day doing something, and all of a sudden the TV screen, which she was looking at, there's no blue screen in her house that she could look at to do the weather. Apparently a dog ran by and bumped it, so the whole TV was shaking.
Oh, my God.
And she reached over and grabbed it, and she made the joke about the dog hitting it. And frankly, I don't think that's all that bad. Sometimes the news is just so sterilized. There's never any mistake. There's no,
Yeah.
It's sort of fun once in a while when you see something go a little different and people realize, okay, this isn't completely sanitized before it gets to us.
It really is. And IBM just had a survey revealing 54% of adults want to work from home even after post-pandemic. So there's a lot of Americans that have no intention of even going back to the office. If you look at Facebook, for example, they're allowing their employees to work from home for the entire year. Twitter almost allows all of their employees to work from home indefinitely. So there's a lot of big technology companies in Silicon Valley, tech titans, that it makes sense that you can work remotely. But for a lot of jobs, that doesn't make sense. They need you in the office. It's very difficult to train people. But teleworking has been very appealing, a work-life balance if your kids are in school, if schools are open. That's a big key piece. Less stress, usually, when you're working from home, and choice of venue and no commute time. So it gives you more time to focus on your work. But, of course, the biggest issue, if you do have a family and you have kids, a lot of women, although there are more women working than ever, more women are also having to quit and leave their jobs than ever because the schools are closed down. I know more Pittsburg area school districts are moving back to remote learning as COVID cases surge, and so a lot of women are dropping out of the workforce. It's usually the women that leave, not the men, to take care of the kids, and it's really placing a heavy toll on parents.
Yeah, it sure has. Nick Barczyk, our producer, was just reporting on that. More and more schools, including my youngest daughter, we have one left in high school, and they're now remote for the next 2 weeks. So they're really taking a look. At one point, 100 of the 800 kids in their high school were quarantined. So I think they didn't realize.
Oh, my God.
And their school district having trouble getting teachers at this point, too. It's a difficult time, especially to bring in substitute teachers, et cetera, doing that. Talking with Heather Zumarraga on the WMBS Newsmakers line about your new book. And this could not have been any more timely. Obviously, you were working on this before the election came about. But yes. 2021, clearly, as you and I discussed earlier in show prep, it's going to be the year of the woman. We have a female vice president for the first time ever. And I think the last number I saw was 21 new members of Congress are women. And the numbers aren't done yet. I mean, so clearly it's the year of the woman at the government level in Washington.
Yeah, and women now hold more U.S. jobs than men. Now that also reflects during the pandemic, frontline workers are usually nurses, right? A lot of them are registered nurses, and the majority of nurses are also women. This data reflects the future of the American workforce. You look at a study done by the IMF. They said both genders bring a lot of different skill sets into the workforce. So you're seeing more women in Congress, more women in government, regardless of if you're Democrat or Republican. Both parties have a lot of women, a lot more women being represented. Biden is hiring a lot of women to his cabinet, as well as you just mentioned the Republican congresswomen that were hired this year, 21 so far. It's amazing. And so I think a lot of men, their surveys have been done, 60% of men, maybe you admit it, maybe not, but feel uncomfortable working with women post-Me Too in the workplace. And I can't blame them, to be honest. It brings a different dynamic. It's the new, modern, inclusive corporate workplace. And it's not a political book, and a lot of people appreciate that, I think, if you want to break from politics at some point in time.
We need it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's anecdotal evidence of why men need this information now more than ever. It will prove very timely as we get a vaccine. Moderna and Pfizer are coming out with their vaccines, and hopefully get past this pandemic and go back to the office.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And I remember Nick and I talking about that, my gosh, 6-7 months ago. Imagine the world right now without the internet or without Wi-Fi. And still there's rural areas around the country that still struggle with high-speed internet. But can you imagine how this pandemic would have affected
it would be the Great Depression.
Oh, it would, or worse, right? If you could get worse than that, if folks weren't able to work from home or learn from home, and frankly, yeah, there are areas that struggle with high-speed internet, but the Wi-Fi out there was amazing that it was able to all of a sudden, almost on a day's notice, handle half of America working from home and almost every student at learning from home back in I guess it was March when this first kicked in. It really was amazing that it was able to be handled.
It is, but is it a replacement for human interaction? You and I are speaking on the phone right now, but a lot of millennials and the younger generation aren't even comfortable picking up the phone anymore because they're so hooked on technology. And again, you can't blame them. It's saved us through this pandemic, but we become so dependent on it that when you go back to the workforce and you meet with people face to face, hopefully without wearing a mask someday, do you shake hands? Do you give them a hug? Do you kiss them on the cheek? It becomes very awkward if we're only speaking to our devices all the time.
Right, and it is odd right now. Early on, anytime I walked up to somebody, man or woman, I would shake their hands. And I have 4 daughters. And
now you don't.
No, you
Elbow
don't.
Bump.
And you feel like you feel bad not doing it. It's almost you feel like you're being rude by not putting your hand out to shake someone's hand. I've always thought.
And men have another problem, another dynamic of, again, post-Me Too movement. What type of touching or physical interaction is okay? And we've become awkwardly distant because of COVID. But when we are with each other, what is okay? What is the norm? There are no set rules, but I tried to come up with a consensus of what is acceptable in general and not in corporate culture.
We don't want to give away your entire book, of course, but let's touch on some of those things in this book. And it's a good one, and I've read most of it already. You were good enough to send me a PDF to prepare for this interview.
Thank you.
And I look forward to buying the book itself. I do like books. I just like holding a book. I've tried the Kindle thing. I've tried it. I just like having a book.
There's a show, the morning show, Steve Carell. It's a very funny show. It's Apple TV. I don't know if you've seen it, but he says a woman can say one thing about you, and then your life is gone. And of course, that's not true. That's not the case. But
right.
He's just revealing the hypersensitive world that we live in today.
Yeah. In Chapter 7 of your book, you talk about ways to change how. Well, you talk about how men generally speak very bluntly or get to the point. And interesting. I use an example here. You said here, why weren't you at the meeting? And instead of that, try, did something happen this morning? I noticed you weren't at the meeting. So it's a simple exchange, a simple change of how you're saying it, but it does make a real difference when you're dealing with especially a subordinate.
Absolutely. So this comes under criticism and critique. And when you're giving it, if you're a manager or an executive and you have to give it to female employees, instead of saying things very bluntly, like you said, why weren't you at the meeting, you try, did something happen this morning? I noticed you weren't at the meeting. So it's not an automatic accusation. Or instead of, look, your plan, the project lacks the necessary details. You would say, is there any way we can expand on page 14 through 22?
Get information on her newest book coming out in January. You can pre-order it now, Men's Guide to Corporate Culture. You've given us some extra time here today, Heather, so I appreciate it. And congratulations. Best of luck with your book here, The Practical Guide to the New Normal and Relating to Female Co-Workers in the Modern Workplace. It's a fascinating topic to talk about. I enjoyed and still enjoying reading it. I think it might be one of those rare books, and I don't do it too often. I'm going to finish reading it and probably read it again. I don't do that all that often. Nicholas, I'm going to get you a copy of this book, maybe
yes,
signed,
please.
And then there's going to be a quiz, on-air quiz.
Yes, and it will be brought up in my next evaluation with the boss.
The next annual evaluation.
Biannual. Actually, for me, it's every week, really. It should be.